So you've heard me say Power Platform. What is Power Platform? It's Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents, which are really those bots. So although we focus a lot in this group just on Power BI, there are other groups that I'll go through in the presentation that actually focus on the other on the rest of the Power Platform. So we have a ton of events. If anything, during this time, everything is virtual and free. So it's a really, really exciting time, but it's also overwhelming. But anyway, we've put together here a few list of events. And also, again, if you want to learn about the rest of the Power Platform outside of Power BI, there are other local groups that you can sign up for and attend their events. They do their events monthly, especially the Power Apps / Power Automate user group in DC, and then the rest that you see here. So please feel free, and we can add the links
this is
to the.
Norman. That would be on my.
Sorry, what was that?
Team.
Hello.
Sorry, I'm on mute patrol.
Okay, awesome.
Feel free to speak up if you have anything to add. Sorry, I muted people if we heard background noise.
Awesome. Okay, so then moving on with more events, there's a Power BI Dev Camp that is being run by Microsoft. There's only been one event, and the next event is happening on September 24th, so feel free to sign up. The one on September 24th is about writing PowerShell scripts, so highly recommend it, and again, it's free. Then there's this other event, Power Platform 24, a 24-hour virtual event. It is also free, and it's the Power Platform people who are organizing it. So full of good information, and that this is happening on October 1st. Okay, so also this is something that I just started attending because I've been working on Power Apps a lot. I attended the last one and I found it super, super helpful. Basically, there's this thing called the Power Apps Community Call, where a bunch of experts, people from Microsoft, other super users call in and they have presentations on what is going on with Power Apps. They answer questions, so it's a really, really great call. Call. So if you want to sign up for it, just use the link below, and it'll save a calendar invite. I'll send you a calendar invite, and you could just join the call. It's really, really helpful. 1 hour every month. Other upcoming events. Oh my goodness, again, we have so many. There's a business application launch event. This is a Microsoft event. I believe James Phillips is going to be a speaker, so sign up. Microsoft Learn, there's a ton of courses. Actually, Shannon and I took a course the other day that we found on Microsoft Learn. There's a ton, so please feel free to check out that website and sign up. In addition to that, we have Global Con that just happened. It's run by a bunch of power users, and although that event is already over, you can still watch all of the recordings on demand for a fee of $179. But if you don't want to pay that and you want to watch the next one is coming up. I think it's in October, November. Shannon is presenting in that one, so is it October, November, Shannon? Sorry, I forgot. Global Con 4.
Sorry, I'm
now November.
Between windows. Yes, it's at the end of October.
Oh, end of
and
October.
Leading up to the event, they're having these like Tips Tuesdays or something where there are going to be 15-minute sessions. And so I will drop the link in the chat for that.
Oh, awesome. Great. Thank you. So again, lots of events. Can't keep up. Job opportunities. this is a community-led group. So if there are any announcements that you guys want to share, whether your company is looking for somebody who has this like Power BI skills or Power Platform skills, or if you are looking for a particular job, then please take a moment, introduce yourself. We're all just friends here, or share any relevant job opportunities at your company using the chat. If anybody wants to introduce themselves. And
You know what, Rocio, the one woman who had reached out to me, I haven't heard back from, and I don't see her in the participants. So I feel like we can keep going.
Excellent. Okay. All right. We're always calling for speakers. We run this meeting every month. So if you have been working on something really interesting at work and you want to share with us, your solution, or you learned something new, whatever it may be, or you just want an opportunity to present something, please let us know. We would love to have you, in any of the upcoming events. So it's always fun when all of us share what we're all learning. Okay, so if you guys have any questions regarding Power BI, there again a lot of resources out there. Some of the ones that we always like to list are Dashboard in a Day. If you haven't, if you're completely new to Power BI and you want to learn it, Dashboard in a Day is probably your best bet. It's free. It's run by Microsoft. And it's an absolutely great training. And then, of course, the Power BI YouTube channel, Guy in a Cube, excellent resource. Of course, Power BI user group, Kerbal, and Twitter. So, the computer doesn't want to.
Mine never works properly when I'm in charge of hosting.
It's like the demo guides are just against you. All right. So context, if you want to, get in contact with any one of us who run this group, our contact information is here. If you want to see our online information as well, it's on the right. Feel free to connect with us. We love talking about Power BI, the Power Platform, data, whatever it is that you want to talk about. Just say hello. So thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to let Katie, our main speaker, introduce herself and go ahead, Katie, take it away.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you so much for having me. I was really happy when Shannon reached out and asked me to talk about Power BI and Power BI embedding. I heard there was a lot of interest. So hopefully the presentation that I do will provide you some value. So I have a PowerPoint, but it's not super boring or super long. So let me just get that going.
I have seen Katie present before, and I can assure you it will not be boring.
Oh my goodness. So where are we? Yeah, screen 2. Here we go. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, looks great.
I guess that's what everybody asks now, right?
Yes.
So
this presentation,
it's going to be on Power BI embedding, and I'm including some row-level security information in here too, because I really feel like embedding and row-level security go hand in hand. So the first thing, a little bit about me. My name is Katie Novotny. I'm a principal engineer at DDI, Development Dimensions International. We are a leadership development company. And what do we do? If you have ever filled out a year-end review that's called a max plan, or maybe had to give an interview question in STAR format, or a review in STAR format, situation, task, action, and result, that is DDI's intellectual property. So that's how you know us. I have worked as a software developer for a very long time. Right now, I lead we're more a data engineering team, but we do data analytics. I have some machine learning folks on my team. I have on-prem and off-prem folks on the team. We use a lot of Data Factory, a lot of Azure resources. I consider myself really more of an Azure expert. I've spoken at Azure Global Bootcamp. And before I got into kind of the data space, I worked on a DevOps team for a while. And before that, I just did plain old vanilla application development. And I still do a little bit of that on my team. So, and here are some things that I like at the bottom. That's a little bit about me. If you'd like to if you have any questions or feel like, dropping some science about Azure, feel free to contact me. Oh, and I will say too, I don't just talk about Power BI embedding. I actually use it at my current job. I've used Power BI embedding for our organization. So I've embedded Power BI reports in SharePoint sites and CRM Dynamics, and also in custom applications. And I've been doing this. We've used Power BI embedded in our custom web application for probably 2 to 3 years with row level security and everything. So, I have practical real world experience. So that's what I'm really hoping to show you, give you some tips and tricks. So without further ado, we're here to talk about, Power BI embedded, row level security. We're going to put it all together. I have an app to show you how you would get that to work. And then I have some resources at the end to facilitate learning. If you want to, take the next steps to do this on your own, hopefully I'll guide you on the way to do that. So the flow of conversation, I have a PowerPoint presentation, some demos. We're going to use Power BI Desktop, the Power BI Service, the Azure Portal, Visual Studio, and then after that, we'll talk about our resources. We can have a Q&A, and don't forget, feel free to put your hand up and ask questions along the way. I really think the value that you get from this is asking, what questions you have and seeing if I can answer or help you out, or if I can't help you, I'll, definitely circle back with Shannon to answer any questions you might have. So here we go. We'll talk about Power BI. Well, what questions do you have about the flow of conversation? Any? Okay.
No questions in the chat yet. Just one quick note. For those of you who are joining our group for the first time, welcome. We are pretty casual and laid back, and Katie really knows this stuff through and through. So please feel free to take yourself off mute and ask your questions.
Yeah, I will not be offended. So let's talk about Power BI. What is it, right? So the general way to think about it, it's just a way to include dashboards, reports, whatever into your custom applications, or like I said before, on an enterprise level into SharePoint or Dynamics, anything like that. What's really nice about it, it makes the user experience really seamless. So you don't put an application or a report into your application and then the user has to sign in to Power BI. They don't even need to know that you're using Power BI. It's a really seamless look to the customer. It's really nice, as we all know, you get a consistent look and feel on all of your devices and across multiple platforms. I know I use the Power BI mobile app, and I look at reports on occasion, and they do look really nice, and it saves a ton of development time, so that the visuals that they have, it would take a really long time to build them as solidly on your own. So they have so many built-in visualizations that are great to use. For Power BI embedded, the application controls the authentication and authorization. They do that by the use of a master account. And this master account is set up in the Azure portal with Azure Active Directory. And basically what it is, a very fancy way to say it, it's a service-to-service authentication that allows non-interactive login. An easier way to say it is the app takes care of logging you in, and you don't even need to worry about it. Another great point about Power BI embedded is you could use row-level security. Row-level security is just a way to restrict your user data so that they only see the data that you want them to see. So for example, one of the big questions you might have when you embed a report in your custom application is, hey, I have all of these clients, but I only want my client to see X information. You use what's called row level security to pass in some information about the user. And then on the back end, on the data model side, that data is limited to what you have, a rule and a role that you've set up. And we'll go through that in more depth later, but just think about that. So a little bit of the architectural overview. So what it is Power BI basically adds an iframe to a web page. Another question I get is, what is an iframe, right? So an iframe is just an HTML element. It stands for inline frame. If you're curious, it's a component of HTML, and it allows you to embed like documents, videos, media within a page, right? So basically you use an iframe in your HTML if you want to integrate content from anywhere, and you don't have to include it in your web layout structure like you would with a traditional element. So basically what happens, we could talk more about the flow in a little bit, but basically you would configure this iframe with a URL, and you have to get a security token, and that just says, hey, am I allowed to even use this? And if you are, then you go to the Power BI service and get information about the report that you want to use. And it allows a direct connection to the Power BI service and allows interaction with the report. What does that mean in like normal human terms? So basically what it means is when you embed an iframe and embed a report in your application, your user is actually hitting the report that's in the Power BI service. So any kind of filters, any kind of slicers, you would use that as you typically would in the report. One thing to think about that is oftentimes I have gotten people who want to put like a local time in the report, like what time was the data updated, or something like that. And if you think about it, so if your report is running in the Power BI service, that means it's living in the same place as your Power BI service. So that could be a Microsoft data center, East US 2, wherever. But so it's not running on your local client. So you won't, any kind of date and time you get would be the date and time of the report, which is on a server anywhere. So if you have a user maybe in Singapore, their local time is not going to be the same local time necessarily as what's on the report. So a lot of times what I do is I just indicate, if somebody wants a date, I indicate it's in UTC, if that makes sense.
Hey, yeah, there's a question from the chat from Keith. He asked, "Do you need enterprise licenses to use this, or is professional okay?"
Professional license, we could talk about licensing. I'm not a licensing expert, but we could definitely talk about what kind of licenses you need to use this. So that's kind of in the next section. That is a great question. So we can go into, there are two Power BI embedded models. User owns data and app owns data. So for the user owns data, every user needs a Power BI Pro license. So you need a license, you need a license. There's no sharing of licenses. You would use this more in enterprise applications throughout your organization. Again, this would be your SharePoint situation. So the logged in users account is what is used for to get authentication to say, hey, is this person allowed to use this? You pass in the name of the user who is logged into your system, and you don't need what's called a dedicated capacity. And we can talk, and I go into a little bit more about what a capacity is. And then you have app owns data. This is what we're going to be covering. No user needs a Power BI Pro license. So you might be thinking, oh, that's really great. I can save all this money because I will buy one Power BI Pro license and it'll be awesome. But here's the rub. You need what's called a dedicated capacity. And basically a capacity, it's like a dedicated set of resources, and it's reserved for your exclusive use. So that's where you would publish your dashboards and report without needing to purchase a per user license. Does that answer your question?
Silence means yes,
Yes.
that was the best response you ever could have provided.
Oh, great. Yeah, and the app owns data too. Again, think about that model. So user owns data, organization, SharePoint, app owns data. That's in your custom application. So what happens is, like I said, you don't every user who uses it doesn't need a Power BI license, because could you imagine that nightmare? I don't even know how you would do that. So basically what they do is you have what's called a service principal or an application identity, and you give that identity permission to run the report. Again, then and then what happens is you have to pass in information about the user via JavaScript or something to do any kind of row level security and limit the data in the report. And you need a dedicated capacity to use that. So there's no free lunch. Okay. Any questions about what questions do you have about the Power BI embedded models? Okay, great. So we're going to go through a typical workflow. Remember I said before, for your custom application, your users don't need to know anything about Power BI. You only need one Power BI Pro license to run this. So what it is this account acts as a master account for your application. This is kind of like a proxy account. And this Power BI Pro account allows you to generate embed tokens, and it provides access to the Power BI service and resources within that service. So we'll walk through a typical workflow for a custom application for app owns data. So you would have a user, you would be sitting there and they would launch your application via a web browser. And so at that point, the application is like, hey, someone's using this, someone wants to view this report. Is this even allowed? Does this person have access? So the application then calls out to something called Azure Active Directory, and it says, hey, is this cool? And if it is, it gets an access token. And with that access token, that allows it to call the Power BI service. So then the application calls the Power BI service API, and it says, hey, here's this token. We are cool to access you. Here's also some other information about what report we want to access. So think about if you have a bunch of reports in your workspace, how would you even know which one you need to access? So you pass that information about what you need into the Power BI Service API. And you do that from client-side code. So yeah, the application passes the embedding data and security information to client-side code, and that's running in the browser. And then you have typically client-side JavaScript, and that embeds the Power BI resource in your application, and you do that via the iframe. So that's it. That's Power BI embedding. It's it in a nutshell. And again, think about it too. Always remember the report is running in the service. That's just a direct connection to the report that's running in the service. It hasn't been loaded into your report or anything like that, if that makes sense. Yeah, it creates the iframe and initializes the embedded resource. So what questions do you have about the flow? Anything? No? So this is just like, I pulled this from a Microsoft document. If you can see, it just goes through the workflow. It's just a little bit of a clearer picture. So you would go to the browser, call out to AAD, say, hey, can I get this? And then you authenticate through, after you authenticate, you authorize to the Power BI service. And that's all that it is really. Anybody have any questions about embedded? You know, just kind of the high level concepts.
Katie, we are with you.
All
There's
right.
There's some good chat happening, but no specific questions that have come out so far.
Great. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm like seeing, you know, when you present with PowerPoint, it gets your screen all like a mess, right?
I do
So
have a question. I'm just curious, like, why do people use it, Power BI embedded rather than, sharing it I guess I could see for like external clients or things like that. But have you noticed that like a lot of people use this option for internally sharing reports within the organization?
we use Power BI embedded.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually we have like at our organization, we do. To your point, yes, it's typically more for external users, but I mean, you can use embedded. You don't need to use row level security. I mean, we just like say I've done it a lot in SharePoint where somebody might need a report in a SharePoint site, even for company use, like maybe, you know, maybe there's like workspace sprawl. I mean, I don't know if anybody else has that, but it's like, what workspace is this in? So sometimes it's a little bit easier for us to just say, here, go to the SharePoint page and see your report. And that way to, you know, you can limit it.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the next thing we're going to go over, I don't know how your level of familiarity with row level security, but I think it's pretty cool. It was really tricky when I first started using it. I really didn't understand what all you can do with it. So I thought we could talk a little bit about it now. So basically, like I said, it is used to restrict user access to data for reports or dashboards. And so it's really cool because you can have one report in the Power BI service, but multiple users with multiple levels of data access can be looking at that report, and they're all seeing different data. So you need to configure your row level access on an embed token. And we're going to go through this. So the first thing you need to understand, there are like three main concepts. They're users, roles, and roles, right? So what are users? That is the end user who's looking at the report, who wants to look at the report. What is a role? A role is something that you would set up in the Power BI desktop, right? So you have users who belong to roles. And a role is a container of rules. And it's typically you have names like sales manager, sales rep, and you create that in the Power BI desktop. And then you have rules. Roles have rules, and those rules are the actual filters that are going to be applied to the data. So the rules could be something, a lot of times it's country equals US or manager equals, East region, something like that. I use a lot of dynamic row level security, which is it's fun to do because you don't have to set up as much, you don't have to maintain a per user user roles and rules. And I could show you a little bit more about that. Another thing that you can do to restrict access of your data is to use JavaScript filters. And you use those obviously in your client-side JavaScript. So the difference between row-level security and JavaScript filters is the row-level security is much, much more secure. So JavaScript filters could potentially have somebody with malicious intent could do some cross-site scripting, maybe see data that they're not supposed to see. So if you if it really doesn't matter if the person can see the data or not, go ahead and use JavaScript filters. I found them a little bit tricky to set up, but you can definitely, I have done that in the past, but I would definitely advise row level security because then you're loading, less data to the user, even the performance is a little better, and it's totally secure because what happens is, again, on that embed token, you pass in the information to the report, and on the data model, it limits the data that you can see. So it's happening on the back end. The user can't intercept that. And again, it's just more secure. So in row level security for the app owns data model, like I was saying, you must pass in a role, and you do that in some JavaScript, and you must pass in a username. This was the part it kind of took me a while to wrap my head around. So what happens is when you set it up for, when you pass in a username, don't think of it just as it has to be the person's username. I've concatenated multiple pieces of data together and said, hey, the username is, say, a client ID and a user ID and a program type. And I pass that through, and that's called the user ID. And then in DAX, you can separate that. You could do whatever DAX operation you want on that. So don't think of it as just like, I need to pass the username. Like the username can be whatever data you want it to be. It just needs to be called username. And you can only pass in, you can't pass in like an array of, you can't pass in an array of things at a username, or nor can you pass in like multiple usernames. So I can show you, I have like a pretty good example of how to do that. And that was the part that was tricky, because I was like, well, I have like 2-level security that I have to do. I have to secure on user and client. I was like, how the heck am I going to do this? And I was like, oh, you can just, concatenate those together and, do some DAX on the back end to split them apart and limit your data. And in the report, when you're using app owns data, row level security and app owns data, the report, the filter has to be called username. Like I said, because you pass in, that's what you pass into the Power BI service. So that was like really tricky for me to think about it that way at first, but fortunately I've been doing this for a couple years now, so I figured that out. Does anybody have any, what questions do you have about row level security? Anything?
Katie,
No.
we've got a lot of conversation going on in the chat actually about the new kind of what was talked about at Ignite with the kind of native experience of Power BI in Teams.
Yeah.
So the question was asking whether or not you needed to use embedded to embed Power BI into Teams.
You know what? That's a great question. Have you ever in Teams, set the Power BI report as a tab at the top?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done that, but I tried to create a Power BI, on the left menu, like one of those, I forget what it's called.
Like the apps, like you can add.
Yeah, and I wasn't allowed to do that. I don't know if I had to be an admin on our O360 account or what, but I couldn't get that to work. Maybe it was in preview at the time and just something I hit it at a goofy time, but I'm not really sure about that.
Yeah. So, and we just posted the link to the announcement in the chat.
So you might want to ask now, like, okay, I want to do this Power BI embedded. I'm all about this. This is for me. So what would I like? Where would I start? Where would I go? So the first thing you'll need to do is create a service principal in Azure Active Directory. And actually, I have a web page up, and it'll take you right through the steps. And right before this presentation, I walk through all the steps because I like to do that just in case something has changed and I need to change my presentation because I'd hate to give everybody incorrect information. And the steps, like step by step, it works. It's solid. You can do it for free. And I'll tell you how to do that as we go through it. So you need to go into the Azure portal, and you have to be like an admin on it. What I do is I create my own tenant, and that's not hard to do. You just press a couple buttons, and it's just like a personal tenant. Then I create a service principal in Azure Active Directory, and then I use whatever user I've created in AAD to log into Power BI, get a Power BI Pro license for free, because you can get a Power BI Pro license for free if you just want to play around with it. And then you would need a capacity. But again, you can do that if you don't have one. What I'm showing you now is I've done this all for free. It costs $0. And then you would need to have some code in your app, and you'll need to write code, and that's about it. And there are Power BI REST APIs that can be used on any platform. So like maybe if you're using Python, JavaScript, you could definitely use the Power BI REST APIs, and those there are also Power BI .NET SDK packages. It's just a dooget package, and it just puts a fancy wrapper on the REST API calls. And I guess there is, now that I think about it, there is a JavaScript SDK too. So client side, you can do that too. So that's the end of my presentation. Any questions about this? If not, I can just kind of, the first thing that I can do is, let me see, I hate, okay, there we go. Shut this down. And I will bring over this, how we talked about before. Where are my steps? Here we go. Like this is literally exactly what you need to do to play around with Power BI embedding. So, and I have this link at the end of my slides. If you'd like to see the slides, I could give them to Shannon and she can, disseminate them however you do. I'm going to clean them up first, but so you would just create a Power BI tenant, go in there into Azure Active Directory. You could create a new directory. The screens are a little bit different. These look to be a little bit outdated, but the steps are correct, if that makes sense. So if you might look at the picture and when you go to do it, it might look a little bit different, but if you just follow the steps, it'll be fine. So you create a directory in Azure AD, all free if you have, an Azure portal account. Then you create an Azure directory tenant users. One global admin, one is the person who's going to be using the user that you're going to use for your embed token. So you go through here, create your users, you create your admin, then you create a user that you use for embedding, and then you go to the Power BI service and you sign that bad boy up. You sign the second account up for a Power BI account, and it's free for I think like 30 days or 90 days. So you have a decent bit of time to experiment around. And honestly, because I do a lot of presentations, after they expire, I just go in, create a new tenant, and start the process over. And I just keep creating new users that way. So if you feel that you really just want to experiment and play around and you don't have time within the allocated time, you could just create a new tenant and do this all over again. I've done it many, many times. Okay, and then there's some other steps too. I have a little piece of paper that I wrote everything down. So if you're looking for this, so you would need to, the Azure Active Directory, which we want to create your org, and this is kind of what your domain would look like. You create your global admin, and this is what the email address will be like. These question marks obviously are your domain name. You create a regular user for embed. You go to the Power BI service, you say, hey, I want a free account, a free Power BI Pro account for this one. And then what you have to do is you have to go back into, you have to register the application in Azure Active Directory. So you have to create an application and then register it. That sounds very tricky, but it's not. You just go into your Azure portal, there's an application, you add application. Yeah, there you go. App registrations, new application registration. And then this is outdated. It doesn't ask you to use a native app. It used to be native and web. I forget what it is now, but it's easy to create. You'll see right away. And then you need to add, and this is the name of your app, and that is your redirect page. And just use something like that, localhost redirect. You can change that later if you ever need to. I never have. Then you have to go back to your application directory and make sure that your users can use the correct Azure API. So you have to look at the Azure Active Directory, and then you'll see it when you go there. If you go and you add, I think it's add roles, you add the Azure Active Directory, and then you add the Power BI service. And then what you have to do, there's a button at the top. You just pop that. It says delegate permissions. So that delegates permissions all the way down the stack so that your user will be able to do that. So every user that you have in that tenant will be able to use those Power BI APIs, right? Then you go to your cert, then you go to the Power, and so you're done Azure side. You are good. One thing you want to do is you want to write down the application ID, that app that we just registered. You'll need it for your code, in this case in Visual Studio. Then you go to the Power BI service. You know, you create a workspace. I'm sure all of you have done that. And then you can take whatever report you want, publish it to that workspace, and now you're like well on your way. And then what I've done here, and honestly, for the code that I have in production, there is, and this again is in my notes, there are these awesome samples out there in GitHub, Power BI developer samples, and they have samples in a variety of languages, platforms. I use the .NET framework, and honestly, when I did this for my production application, I was able to, you know, kind of figure out what to do and just pull from these .NET sample codes. Just pull the code, figure it out, and do it on my own. It wasn't anything onerous. I'll show you. I have an example. I have this sample that I've downloaded with the sample report, and I can show you how this all works together. And again, this is in my notes too, so, or in my slides. So if you ever want to do this and you get my slides, you'll be good to go. So then after you download the app, for me, obviously my editor is Visual Studio, so I would enter the application that we entered, and then I would get the workspace ID from the Power BI service and the report ID. And I must have noted, I found some errors in their code, so I just had to note it. If you wanted to do this, you need to do some upgrades. Okay. So is that fascinating? Yeah, no. No. Oh my goodness.
Well,
I can show you a little row level security sample that I did. We can start with that. Just a little guy. So this is something that I did to help. If you're not familiar with row level security, this really helped. In my opinion, it really helped some of our users understand the difference and how to do this. So I created just some measures here. This is my username, which is obviously different from my user principal name, right? They're the same in the service, but on desktop they're presented a little bit differently. And then what I did is here, what I wanted to do is I am very lazy, and I didn't want to necessarily have to put every single user. So when you pass in a username in Power BI, you'd have to add those users to the row level security in the roles. And I'll show you that, but I was like, man, I do not want to add every single user that I encounter into this list. So what I want to do is I want to say, hey, if your company is at this domain, this is the data that you're allowed to see. So I did a little bit of very non-fancy DAX, and I was able to pull just the domain name from my username. And then you can see here, I have some table relationships. These are not DDI clients also, I just want to be clear. But you can see, I'll show you how to have row level security. You can see the Valvoline, there's an image. So you can even do branding with row level security. And you can see I set up some tables with some relationships. I have my measures column, domains, clients to programs, and because in case people wanted to do a multi-level row level security, they didn't, so I kept it easy. So you could go here and manage roles, and I'll show you how I set this up. There's the role that I was talking about, and you have to name it. basically you can name this whatever you want. You can create whatever role, whatever makes sense to you. But if you're putting this in an application in the Appins data model, you'll have to know the role name and just pass it through. And I'll show you how to do that. So then you have to put a filter. So this is my, this is the table that I'm saying, hey, when I pass in username, please filter this in this way. So you can see what I did here. This is what I was talking about. When you pass in a username or a user principal name, you can do whatever DAX you want to it. Like you can split it up, you know, like I use tildes a lot to separate values. So you can have, you know, like I was saying, user ID, tilde, client ID, tilde, program ID, tilde, region, and then just split those up and do your, split those up in DAX and do your filtering as you need to. So that was really cool. So I can show you how this works. So where do we go? Modeling, view as. So you can see if you go here, you select other user and then filtered. And so I can put KT at Val. So you can see, oh, look what happened. There's my user principal name. There's the username that's being passed in. There's the domain name. And it's limiting it to only see the Valvoline clients. See? You could see here too, like I just created, these are like little internal tables I created. So you can see the client, how they're set up. And just program name, like the domain name and client. So I have the client and then I separated out the domain name. And I will say too, like one thing that I noticed, say you want to just experiment around with this, I couldn't get you have to have like an enterprise email. So if you want to just say, hey, I'll put my Gmail account in and put it up maybe on a workspace, it's not working. We needed to get like a Verizon account or something. So what you would do at this point, so this is all set up to use row level security, right? Then you would just publish this to whatever workspace you want. And then on the workspace, let's go here. I can show you. Let's go here. Let me log in as a correct user here. Oh. So does anybody have any questions about this now? Are you getting row level security? Have you used this a lot?
We've got a robust conversation going on in the chat.
Oh my goodness. Are they like, please make her stop?
Of course not. No. Not at all. Does anyone want to take themselves off mute and ask any questions? Z, nothing?
No, this is great. I mean, talking about embedded earlier, like I wish we had this meetup maybe 2 months back because we were doing an embedding in Power Apps portal. We usually figured it out kind of going through the documentation is essentially what you just walked us through, but this is great.
Thanks. Yeah, come on, this stupid thing. I like hate logging in to anything. Like I have so many accounts. Okay, skip for now. Okay, here we go. Here we go. We are back on track. So you can go here, say you would publish it to a workspace. You would go to this report on the workspace, and then I forget, oh, this is the old, you would go, I think it's, where are the settings? Okay, this is the old way. So you go to security, right? And then, ta-da, you would enter, you see this? If you look at my, let's publish this. Let's see.
Katie, I think there is a question.
Yeah, what's up?
Or somebody raised their hand. Clay, I believe.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt while you were going through this, but this has been great. And I was curious, with row level security, have you ever tried to like hide certain pages in a report? And would row level security allow for that, or is that something you need to do in the code of your app?
I have thought about doing that, and I have never been able to get it to work. I think it's more of a data model hiding as opposed to an application. You might be able to do it, but I tried it and I was like, oh man, this is rough. I couldn't get it to work. Maybe you could. I doubt it. So you can see this row level security. So let's go here, data sets. This is like the, so then you go to settings, right? And you can see here for row level security. Oh, why didn't I go to security? Go here, go to security, and you can see filtered, right? And that was the rule that we had. And then you would enter the people who belong to this role. So you do, you know, my laziness doesn't help me here. You have to individually enter everybody's email address this way, right? Using, this would be more of the user owns data model, where everybody who logs in, their user name would, you know, you're looking at the report under the username that you are logged in as, right? So this would be a user owns data. So you would use this to embed in maybe a SharePoint site. I use that because I've done that before. So you would need to add everybody who belongs in that role right here. And there is no programmatic way to do it. I'm hoping that Ted Pattinson Power BI monthly demo has information about how to use the PowerShell, use PowerShell to use the REST APIs, because this is great, because I have some very cranky DBAs who get mad when people ask them to enter, or, you know, Power BI administrators who they get mad when I, you know, you give them a list of 100 people and they have to add them here. So that is kind of how, does anybody have any other questions about row level? Have you used row level security a lot? Have you? No.
Yeah. So we're using row level security now. I think that one of the challenge we're trying to do is when user logs in, we want to it's kind of a row level security at the same time, not row level security. When you log in, we want to show them the default page that's for the login user, but you can uncheck yourself and still see other people's data after you look at yours. So it's not for security purpose, it's more for interface. Like you come in, you see your data first, and after you download your data, you say, hey, I want to see other people's. You uncheck something, then you can go browse other kind of stores or other regions information.
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah, I've never seen that exact methodology, but that might be something.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at the last piece of information here was the actual, let's get to the code. That's always the fun part. Right, so this is the Power BI app that I downloaded. And you can see here, please don't use these squids. I'm going to delete them anyway. But you can see here the application ID. Remember we were talking about that. That's from what the app registration that you do in Azure Active Directory. Then your workspace ID, which you know, you all know. That would be here, here, go here. You can see your workspace ID and then your report ID. So let's take a look at that. And then I have my embedded user and my Power BI embedded password. And then we can run this, and this will be an example. I think I put some breakpoints too, so that we can kind of walk through the code a little bit. So basically what I had to do when I downloaded this report is I needed to get it to build correctly. Like I said, I found some errors in it. Not a big deal, and I have found that happens a lot when you do it. So you might have to, you know, Google some errors, and then I just entered this into their into the web config, And then there's an embed service and client-side HTML. And I have some, let's just run it and see what we get here. Is it like not running? Oh, come on. There we go. So this is my custom application. And then you say, hey, I want to embed a report. And then let's see where it drops us in. So you can see at this point, we're not passing in a username and we're not passing in a role. So that means we're not going to use any like row level security. And I can show you where to set that. So we're going to F5. And you can see the report. So that is great. So then you're like, okay, let's see some row level security. So if you look in this report here, and again, this is a sample. You can do this all on your own. This is the sample from Microsoft. Let's look at it's in modeling manage roles. That's where you would kind of find your roles and your rules. So you were passing in the username. That's like what I said before. Remember, you're always passing in the username. What this data is, it's up to you and how good your DAX skills are to pull that apart. So let's look at one of the managers in this report. Oh man. So let's look at Andrew. So let's go back to our application and say, oops, that's not my app. Where'd you go? Oh, where'd my app go? Embarrassing. Here it is. So we want to view this as a different user. So Andrew Ma, roles manager, reload, and then here you could see it's not the username that we were talking about. That's being passed in. And you could say they're the roles. And you can see instead of 4 stores, you now see 2. And then all the filters get filtered down. So that's how it works. That is basically how you would do this. Now, of course, obviously when you do it, so let's take a look if I can find some good JavaScript on how you set this up. I forget where this is in here.
Katie, you can't hear the audible oohs and ahs. They're there. People are just on mute.
Oh, go on.
It's true.
Yeah, so there's one place you're setting the config. I just want to show you in the JavaScript kind of what it would look like. There we go. Kind of here, you're looking for the username, the role model. I don't know where it's set up. There we go. I guess it just embeds it like this. I do it a little bit differently, but yeah, this is basically it. You just say, hey, there's your username. And does anybody have anything else they would like to see in the app? Would you like me to like put a breakpoint somewhere else and we can walk through the code, or are you well satisfied with this? Okay, well,
Lay, did you get your question answered? I just saw your hand go up again, I thought.
I did. That was probably just an accident.
Okay. So here are some resources. The links are in here. Like I said, I'll get this out to Shannon, but this is just kind of like an overview of what you'll see. The Power BI Dev Camp, that is what we were talking about earlier, and you can see it'll go, oh, come on.
I put the link in the chat as well for that.
Yeah, so this is it. They're your camp sessions. This is actually using .NET Core, so that's pretty cool. If you're doing that, it gives you a sample. And then actually what was really cool about this was they have a link to the session. So if you wanted to watch this video, like if you couldn't watch it real time, you can go back and, you know, watch it at your leisure. Yeah, so there's that. And I don't know, is this it? Yeah, this might be it right here. That's the webinar. So that was one link that I thought that's like really new. I thought that was really helpful. There's a Power BI embedded playground too out there, right? I haven't used it a ton, but I think there are some, I'll show you some code if you want to play around with it to see what you can do. Some people have really, really liked it. And there's some really great samples out there. The Power BI developer samples on GitHub, and that was what, come on, man. That's what I just showed you, where I found the sample to get the code. And like I said, it is like, if you do that, it is like dirt simple. You'll be able to do it. It's not a problem. There we go. Oh well. And then there's this one. Come on, control. Why aren't you working? This is an hate you reset. So you could go here and you can set up your Power BI embedding environment here. So you're supposed to be able, instead of going to AAD, you're supposed to be able to register your application and do that all from here instead of going to Azure. I haven't been able to get that to work. I thought it was a little bit goofy, but it's definitely a recommended method. I probably was doing something wrong, but that's another way to do that. Samples again. Your samples, you'll get that. I think it's really cool that they have so many different languages that this is available in. So, you know, it's really platform agnostic. And then we have this one is really nice. A couple of these have gotten updated lately. If you're familiar with these, the white papers for Power BI. And I thought that there might be an embedding one here. I don't know, maybe it's just like in Microsoft Power BI Premium. So there are some white papers on Power BI, and then the last link is what I showed you earlier about how to create an AAD tenant. And literally, if you just walk through these steps, you'll be able to create your user and have your report embedded. Like, because I remember it took so long the first time I did it because these instructions weren't as clear. It was, you know, like I said, it was probably like 3 years ago that I set this up. So it was not a smooth process, but now, like if you follow these, if you can follow a linear set of instructions, you'll be, you know, well on your way. So that's about it. Again, if you want to know a little bit more about me, feel free to, you know, link in, follow me on Twitter, email me. I have the Azure meetup. I just go to that one a lot. I actually run the Pittsburgh Power Apps and Flow user group. I should probably put that on there. I use Flow a lot. Power Apps not as much. I've gone to like the Power App in a Day session and everything, but I haven't had occasion to build like a production level app with it. So I'd be interested in learning that. If any of you are, you know, interested or have a good session, I'd love to attend.
Thank you, Katie. And I think Jamie also posted the, oh, there we go. Shannon posted the Pittsburgh Power Apps and Flow user group, and Jamie just posted the DC Power Automating Power Apps user group. The meeting is coming up on October 1st.